So I wanted to say a little bit about Kant, which I didn't get to mention in my last video. Um, and it's not so much that I even agree or like to work within Kant's epistemological framework, but Kant is carrying on a certain established tradition in the Western philosophical canon. He's responding to Hume, who was in a way responding to Descartes, and um, trying to sort of Kant was trying to synthesize the rationalist Cartesian understanding and the empirical Humean understanding, and he took the best of both of these philosophers, I think, and came to the conclusion, which isn't that far off from what you were articulating, Cropper, about how we come to have knowledge of the world. We have a mind, right? And the mind is receptive to certain sensory impressions. And once it has received those impressions, the mind, the intellect, is able to order them and derive these various logical relationships between these representations which we have had impressed upon us through our sensuous experience or sensory experience. Now, this is Kant's picture, as much as it would be Ayn Rand's. Now, it's different when you get into the complications here, because of course Kant has this dualism between the phenomenal world and the noumenal, and the noumenal is basically equivalent to Plato's realm of forms, and the phenomenal is that which we experience empirically through our senses. Now, Hume rightly pointed out that the senses are often flawed, and in fact, based purely on sensory experience, we have no evidence of causality, nor time. And so, because we don't experience these through our senses, Hume thought, well, causality is just a matter of assumption because of our habitual experience, but we have no reason, no logical proof that the sun will in fact rise tomorrow. It's done so every prior morning that we've experienced, but we have no reason, based on experience, to believe that it will rise again tomorrow. And Kant wanted to avoid this lack or this sort of impotence that Hume was claiming our minds have, by pointing out that space, time, causality, and other a priori ways of structuring reality are just that. They're the sort of underlying foundation of our ability to know the world at all. So they exist in the knower, and what the world is outside of the way we have been structured, and these the way these intuitive structuring principles have shaped the world for us. What the world is outside of these principles is not something we can know, and so far as it goes, at least if we buy into Descartes' meditations, in the sense that we really can question everything but our own ability to question, meaning all of our sensory experience could be delusory. It could be the creation of a demon, but the one thing the demon couldn't create was our own ability to doubt ourselves. So we as thinkers have this sort of ultimate, almost noumenal existence, you could say. And what you said, Cropper, that the rational mind orders the senses, is exactly what Kant would say, though there's certainly, I think what drives you to say that his system is irrational is this phenomenal noumenal divide, that we can't ever have complete knowledge of nature because we only have our perspective. But even if we update this Kantian perspective in light of modern biology and physiology, we understand that every animal, including the human being, has evolved the particular physiological structure that they possess today. And our five senses exist as they do and perceive the world that they do based on their structure, because it's allowed us to survive. Now, nothing about sort of contingent nature of our senses uh, leads me to believe that they would give us an objective picture of what the world is in itself. Every animal has its own perceptual organs, and those perceptual organs, because they have evolved differently, because they have a different structure, are going to perceive a slightly different world. Um, and so, the human being with our senses, what makes you think that they would be capable of providing us with a picture of reality in itself, divorced from our subjective perspective? So, when you look at it in this way, I think Kant was onto something, and I have a desire to sort of articulate a participatory epistemology where the knower actually enters into and identifies with whatever it's trying to know. Um, and it's a work in progress for me, as it will inevitably always be, because that's part of the system I'm trying to articulate. Or um, a main point in this system would be that knowledge is an ongoing process, and we're never going to arrive at a complete picture, because every time we try to know something, we subtly change it and alter it. So, this is what I meant by knowledge being an activity. Knowing is doing. Um, it means that you always interfere with what you're trying to know, and so you bring forth knowledge through the process of trying to know. In other words, there is no object separate and distinct from you as a subject. Um, but in fact, when you attempt to know, that attempt and the various modes that you employ in that attempt will manifest some slight change in the object that it is that you're trying to know. I think quantum physics has demonstrated this principle very well within the sciences. I'm talking about it more on a philosophical level here, but certainly when you realize that what we thought of in prior centuries as atoms being discrete marble-like entities is actually false. Particles are these waves of potential, and if we want to know the exact speed of one of these waves of potential, then the more we know about the speed, the less we know about where exactly it is or what direction it's going in. We can only know so much about reality at this subatomic level, because our attempt to know something about it requires that we interfere with it with these various technological measuring devices, and inevitably what we end up measuring has just as much to do with the way we've constructed the measuring device as it has to do with what was there prior to our attempt to gain knowledge of it. And I think this principle is true on every level. If you want to get a good read on someone else's personality, you and your personality has to interact with their personality. And it's almost, one psychologist, Carl Jung, made an analogy between two personalities meeting as though they're two chemicals coming together, and the reaction which is produced ends up changing both people. So you can never have an objective view of somebody else, because you're always involved and changing them in your attempt to know them, just as they change you. So I have a more participatory view, and so I don't really want to defend the Kantian dualism. I think it creates a lot of problems for us. I am a realist of sorts, and I think we can have knowledge of the actual world. I don't think we're limited, but the kind of knowledge that I'm talking about isn't strictly rational. I think rationality is limited, because to know something rationally, you have to divide it up. The root ratio means to know something by comparing one part of it to another. So it gives you an analytical understanding, and some things are not knowable in terms of their parts. You have to understand them in terms of a whole. And so rationality can't help you much in that respect. It can certainly help you alongside some other means of knowing, perhaps an intuitive sense or an artistic sense. But the rational sense on its own, if it's constantly trying to break things up, it's going to always mistake the forest for a bunch of trees. So I'll leave it there, and there could be a part 3. I'm not sure yet, but thanks for listening.